Oh, no, I didn't mean I meant to send that. I heard the little chime that we are recording. So there's a couple of links in the chat for folks who are interested. It's our email address, links to our website, and then the link to spaceweeknewyork.com for the Space Week um, New York information. And I think we're supposed to start at 3:30. Typically, I would give folks a second to join us. For what, 3:31? 32. All right. We'll give it till 33. Just wanted to thank everyone who has joined us today. Very excited to be presenting. Let me just get my slide deck ready to go. All right, we'll give it one more second. I'm less familiar with Zoom. Oh, hi, Evan. How are you?
Hey, excited to be here.
Thank you. For anyone who isn't aware, Evan is my co-founder at Empire Space. So he's in the chat for anyone who is interested. So I'm going to go ahead and kick this off. So thank you everyone who is joining us here in the room and who will be watching later. Thank you to Aries for the invitation and for everyone who put today's event together. We're very excited to be presenting about Empire Space and the role that we play in New York's space ecosystem. So I am Patrick Chase, co-founder of Empire Space. Like I mentioned, my other co-founder, Evan Lerner, is here in the room with us. And we're going to be talking today about New York's space ecosystem and how it is a quiet, kind of under the radar, but also critical player in the 21st century space economy. So we'll go through a presentation. We'll talk a little bit about what it is that we do, how we kind of came into being, what we've learned about New York's space ecosystem, our vision for where that ecosystem can go in the future. And then we will just kind of offer some insights and advice at the end. We know that this audience is educators or students, primarily, not exclusively, but we want to just kind of share some of our lessons that we've learned over the last couple of years building this out. And then we'll be able to take some questions moving forward from that. So I'm just going to go ahead and get started. So just a little bit of background on me and how I wound up here. So I am a native of Rochester, New York, which is upstate New York. For those of you who are not familiar with New York, it is not New York City. I'm about 6 to 7 hours away from Manhattan. My background is actually in political science, but I have always been a die-hard space advocate and space fan as a kid, went into politics and government, and then the last 5 or so years have been using some of those lessons to grow New York's space ecosystem. So we founded Empire Space in 2022, and we serve as the research and networking hub for New York's space ecosystem. That function didn't really exist when Evan and I met and started looking at what was going on here. So we decided to fill that role. And just kind of my background for how I got here. I currently work in local government, have for the last 3 years. I've done some freelance space writing in the realm of space policy, public perception, kind of things of that nature. I had a stint with the New York State Assembly. I've worked in campaigns, usually as a field operative, constituent relations, community contact, things like that nature. I also have some background kind of across the private sector. So that's the short version of me and how I wound up here with you all today. So the overview of Empire Space. So like I mentioned, we are the research and networking hub of the New York space ecosystem. We hold a census database, over 1,500 unique entries of all of the space-related institutions and facilities across the state. This is private companies that work in space-related work, the colleges and universities that offer space-related programming, the financial firms that invest in space-related programming, the community and civic groups, planetariums and museums that serve a critical networking function. So all of those institutions are in our census. You can visit there at empirespace.org/data. We are also an affiliate member of two key statewide space groups, the NASA New York Space Grant Consortium and the New York Consortium for Space Technology. Both of those are based out of Cornell. They do a lot of really fantastic work. We conduct ecosystem analysis like the Needs Assessment Project. I'm going to talk through that in a second. We host networking events, build connectivity, foster innovation, and then we provide insights and consultation to stakeholders. When we speak with companies or colleges or anyone in our census, we help understand what their small part of the ecosystem is, how we can help them grow, how we can help them thrive. So that's a little bit of kind of our mission. To kind of back it up a little bit before we get into specifics, just talking about New York's space legacy. Folks might not be aware that it even has one. New York is probably not the first state many folks would think of when they think of U.S. space exploration, but New York was an early leader in aviation and aerospace. The first transatlantic flights were based out of Long Island. That led to Long Island being a hub for early aviation, which turned into the aerospace industry, which then turned into the space industry. New York is home to the Apollo lunar landers. Right now, the base modules that are still left on the moon when they lifted back off, somewhere buried in there in the wiring is a little plaque that says "Made in New York." We don't think that folks are really aware of that contribution. There are key specialties and areas: optics, finance, data analysis. There's some specialty manufacturing capabilities. Dozens of New Yorkers have been astronauts, and there are a number of key academic hubs: Columbia University, Cornell, University of Buffalo, University of Rochester, Rensselaer Polytech. Our census has more than 60 colleges and universities in it that play a really critical role in New York's space economy. So there has been a lot of contributions over the years, even if New York hasn't necessarily been the most visible contributor. So this is a graphic that we like to use in all of our presentations that kind of really sums up what's going on in New York's space ecosystem. There are both strengths and challenges here. And we exist to amplify the strengths and problem solve the challenges. So the high points: New York is home to Wall Street, so space finance powerhouse. There's a lot of great civic institutions, planetariums, and museums that serve that connectivity function. The academic and research infrastructure that we've touched on a little bit, that we'll get into a little bit more in a second. We do have a NASA presence by various metrics in terms of job creation or economic impact. New York is 15th, 16th, 17th in terms of jobs and economic activity created by work with NASA when you look at all 50 states. So we're not top 5 yet. We hope to be there someday. But we're not bottom 5 either. New York is a significant contributor on par with states like Maryland, that has significant NASA facilities, Ohio, Virginia. Those would be some of our peer states. Areas to focus on are the barriers between those financial resources and New York-based space companies. There are gaps in connectivity. A lot of stakeholders tend to be unaware of their potential partners around the state. So it tends to lead to kind of clustering and fragmentation. We exist to try to alleviate those gaps. And then there are needs for capacity, research and testing, particularly. So the graphic on the right speaks to the strengths: space finance, space talent, but they're not properly integrated with the economic engine, with the companies. And so we exist to fill in those dotted lines, to complete these circles and create a comprehensive ecosystem that is thriving and growing. So this is a highlight of our census. This is the map that you'll see when you go to empirespace.org/data. All of these links on the website are interactive, so you can click on these boxes and it will take you to the data table for that component of the census. Because when we got started, when Evan and I started Empire Space, we asked ourselves the very simple question of who is doing what related to space in the state of New York. And this is the product of that research. We decided to map it out, make it interactive, so that the public and stakeholders can come, see who's doing what where throughout the state, learn more about their potential partners, and then reach out to them. So I had mentioned the needs assessment before. This is one of our key projects that I wanted to highlight. This is a project that we're conducting in conjunction with the New York Consortium for Space Technology. We are conducting a comprehensive needs assessment for the space ecosystem. So this is geared at the private companies. We've identified more than 350 in the state, to get very kind of granular and specific about their strengths and challenges. What are you thriving at? What are you struggling at? And get that information directly from the companies so we can appropriately troubleshoot. Rather than saying companies need more help with workforce development, if we can get feedback in terms of specific skills, specific talent levels, specific challenges, we can then go to other stakeholders, to state and local government, and get much more specific with the solutions that we need to put in place. So phase one was completed last year. We conducted a focus group, got some feedback and updates. We are in the process of executing phase two right now. Finalizing that report and publishing it is our big summer project. As part of our larger economic development effort, working with legislative leaders, economic development leaders, to identify the specific solutions that we need to put in place to make New York a more attractive state for companies, space companies, to get started in the state, to grow here, for existing companies to stay here and thrive, or for out-of-state companies to consider New York as a future location if they choose to expand their operations. And then we're going to use this needs assessment format for the other sectors we've identified in the census. Conducted needs assessment for the college programs, for the planetariums and observatories, figure out what their needs are, and go from there. So it gives us an actual data set informed by the stakeholders themselves about what their needs and challenges are, that allows us then to properly advocate on their behalf for solutions. We wanted to highlight a key event that we actually just finished up for the year. So keep in mind and join us for Space Week New York 2026. But this year was held at the end of May. It's the third year that we've run the program. It's an opportunity to deepen connection. We hold networking events. We hold panels on key issues. This year we had over 500 participants at more than a dozen virtual and in-person events. We had networking receptions. We had an in-person forum day with expert panels. We had virtual spotlight events. We had a virtual town hall. So kind of putting together a diverse program that kind of touches on as many different aspects of our core mission as possible. And a lot of the key questions that we sought to address with Space Week are: how do we market New York in the 21st century space economy? What are our key specialties? What are the unique things that New York does well that we need to lean into? What are the capacities that we need to bring online for the private sector to grow? And then also event proposals. What new types of events can we hold in the future that would be beneficial for the ecosystem? So this is a graphic that kind of highlights the space companies active statewide. Right now, the total employment that we track between all these companies is somewhere just north of 70,000, spread over 350 different companies operating in 132 different localities around the state. You can see the regional breakdowns at the end of this graphic. This is not just a New York City or Long Island-based economy. There are different hubs throughout the state in different regions. Every region has a stake. Even some of the more rural and sparsely populated regions of New York are contributing to this economic activity. So we really wanted to work to dispel the notion that New York space economy just exists in New York City or Long Island, because it doesn't. And so the academic and civic keys to growth, this is something that we looked at a lot of those peer states in terms of how they're growing their economies successfully. And that combination of robust academic offerings and vibrant civic and nonprofit sectors is really critical. The colleges and universities make sense. Industry needs, workforce. So making sure that the academic sector is properly geared into what the private sector needs is fairly self-explanatory. It may be more difficult to implement than than it sounds, but it's fairly straightforward. An underappreciated need is what those facilities, the community groups, the nonprofits, the places like planetariums and museums serve is those networking and collaboration agents. They hold events that bring together the private sector, academia, legislative leaders, economic development leaders. Those groups serve that mixing function where these groups may not in their day to day interact, but those organizations often provide that critical interactive medium that can really foster innovation and connectivity. So our census has more than 340 unique entries for colleges and universities. This is degree programs, student clubs, facilities, on-campus planetariums. So there's a very wide range of offerings throughout the state. SUNY and CUNY, which is the State University of New York and the City University of New York, those are the public university systems statewide and then in New York City offer a lot of really good programs. We're working with those networks to grow their offerings, better integrate them to the private sector. There's also a need to look at community colleges and vocational programs. We're going to get into some of those in a second. But there is a demand for those technical skills, those non-4-year or graduate level programs, and better aligning those with industry needs. And academia is not just colleges and universities. There's dozens of K through 12 schools throughout the state that participate in rocketry programs, astronomy programs. A number of schools in New York host on-campus planetariums, which is a really cool feature. And then there are just a number of really high class museums in the state that offer great community programming. The Rashid Museum and Science Center, MOST, which is the museum in Syracuse, the Hayden Planetarium in New York City, often serve that role as ambassadors for how the general public most often interacts directly with space related programming rather than just reading an article on the news or something like that. Museums are often how the average person will interact with astronomy or aerospace or things like that. And so they really do play a key role in growing economic activity moving forward. So now we're going to go through some of the insights from our needs assessment. We went through some of the back end data to pull some charts that we think might be most interesting for this audience. So these are responses from space companies. This is what the space companies have told us based on the questions we asked them. So I had mentioned at the top that New York space ecosystem has some gaps in connectivity and frequency. And so you'll see here that companies report that they generally don't interact, especially regularly, with other sectors of the space ecosystem, whether that be the civic nonprofit sector, whether that's academia, whether that's other space companies. There's definitely a need to increase that connectivity. That's why we hold Space Week, which is our major annual event. We hold a number of smaller, more targeted events throughout the year. So hopefully over time, this connection frequency shifts towards more, monthly, weekly, and less. We want fewer responses in the never category. And we had understood anecdotally that the connection wasn't really there. This is hard data that we can then track over time to see if our efforts are actually leading to greater connectivity. If they are, we lean into it. If not, we reprogram. So this is the value of that stakeholder informed data. This graph is the likelihood of growing the number of employees. So this is if space companies think they're going to grow this year. This response was actually really encouraging. It means that existing companies in New York are planning on expanding their operations. It speaks to the desire for growth. There is momentum for growth here in New York. It also means that the barriers that we're aware of are not fatal. If they were, companies wouldn't be expecting to grow. So it means that the barriers we've identified, while serious, are not necessarily crippling, and that there is the possibility to kind of reduce those impacts, which would lead to even further economic growth in the future. So this gets into the hiring and staffing challenges, which is probably a little bit more interesting for any students, people who are about to graduate college or something like that. In terms of what companies are reporting, their struggles are in terms of staffing. And you'll see here, retention isn't really an issue. The hiring process isn't really an issue, but the cost, the quantity, and the qualification of applicants is an issue. That tells us that we need to be better aligning what the New York academic space sector is generating and what private companies in the state need. So again, this helps us get more granular with what these companies need to grow. This is another insight in, and I had mentioned this before, with the technicians or trade or associate level talent. We were aware that this was something that stakeholders had mentioned anecdotally. This data kind of confirms that. The companies don't necessarily need more people with, graduate degrees or PhDs. Nothing wrong with those, but there is a much greater need for technicians and people who are actually building or constructing some of these things. We're aware up here in Rochester, New York, where I'm from, big optics center. Kodak was here for a while, so there's still that legacy of optics. Most of the major telescopes that NASA has ever launched have moved through Rochester at some point, and we are aware in this region that the demand for these optics firms, in terms of technicians who are actually going to work directly with the mirrors, is far outstripping what the local academic environment is creating in terms of technicians who are qualified to do that. So that leads us to the focus on community colleges, other trade-based programs that need to be expanded to help fill these needs. Job requirements different to hire for, difficult to hire for. This again speaks to that. Degree type and education level was not reported to be an issue by pretty much anyone. A lot of folks reported issues with technical training, project-specific skills, domain understanding awareness. So it's just more verification of our underlying premise that we need to be more targeted with the skills that companies need. And again, it's the technical, the hands-on, the specific project types that companies are looking to hire for. In terms of how these companies are sourcing their talent, we think this could be a really interesting insight for potential job seekers out there. A lot of companies report using their own network or online platforms. They do utilize university recruiting, but it was not the predominant format that these companies used. So we hope that that's insightful for people who may be looking to enter the job market, who are in the job market looking for a job, in terms of how best to try to reach out to these companies. This speaks to the need for testing facilities. That's something that we have heard repeatedly is an issue. Companies need more access in New York to R&D and equipment testing facilities. It's fairly broad-based. Pretty much any category we thought to ask, someone responded needing more access to those facilities. It's a big component of our work with the New York Consortium for Space Technology. They have ideas about future testing facilities that would be unique to New York, increase that capacity there. So this is a key focus of our conversation, understanding where these facilities exist in New York. Can we better network those existing facilities to space companies operating in the state? And then what capacities don't exist that we need to work with, legislative, economic development, private sector leaders to bring those capacities online. So this is what allows us to get granular. Because it's difficult to go to an economic development leader and say, space companies need more testing. Well, okay, what kind of testing? Until we had conducted the needs assessment, we didn't know what was most in demand. Now we have those specifics. And now having those specifics allows us to appropriately target the areas of greatest demand in a way that we couldn't do without this data. So the goal is how to market New York in the 21st century space age. What is the story that we should tell about New York's role in space exploration? What are our unique strengths that we really need to lean into? One is the academic and research hubs. We have the facilities. We need to better tie them into the companies that exist, but we don't need to create them. We have lots of great universities. It's more about tailoring offerings, expanding offerings, better integrating existing offerings with private companies rather than needing to create something that doesn't exist. Specialty areas that New York is a leader in: optics, data analysis, precision manufacturing. Another one that I should put in there would be precision, not precision manufacturing. I just said that. Medical research. That was a panel that we had during Space Week. There's a lot of really fantastic space medicine research happening in New York. The Aerospace Medicine Biobank is located in Manhattan. Law, space law. There's a number of folks working in space law in the city. Finance is a huge area. So better integrating New York's existing financial ecosystem with the space economy. Consulting, marketing, huge industries in New York City, better integrating them into the space ecosystem, because it's not only what we need to do with existing space stakeholders, but there's that Russian nesting doll concept. So take space medicine, for example. You know, an institution like Cornell or someone like that is already doing space medical research. How do we help them grow what they're doing? But there are also other, medical schools in New York that don't have any kind of connectivity to space, reaching out to those stakeholders and saying, hey, there is opportunity here in space that your institution might be interested in becoming more involved with. So our vision for the future of space in New York is expanding some of these offerings. An incubator or accelerator, there's lots of great existing opportunities, finding ways to make sure that we're properly serving the space startups that operate. The Brooklyn Navy Yard is a fantastic example of some of the great startup ventures and facilities that exist in New York. There's a need for a legal and administrative hub for companies, especially startups, to utilize. Startups often don't have the internal, legal or administrative capacity or focus. So some of those important but quote unquote unsexy questions don't get asked or answered. And so finding ways to provide those kind of resources, especially to those new companies, to help them surmount those challenges early is a goal for us. Amplifying existing state level funding pipelines. How do we expand economic opportunities, expand private sector opportunities? We're working on a job board or a career fair. How do we tie job seekers into space-based companies in New York that are hiring? That's a critical focus. And then again, the needs assessment. Finishing that, publishing that report, running it every year. We can track trends over time. Expand it to other target groups. That really helps us build that initial data set so we understand the specific needs, but then building that data set over time so we can track changes. What's working? What's not working? Are there new issues that are cropping up? Things of that nature. So events and connectivity. Yuri's Night is huge. If you're in New York for Yuri's Night next year, there will be a number of events throughout the state. We're looking to help make sure that New York is really maximizing the cultural and community potential that comes with Yuri's Night. Space Week New York 2026 is we are already in the works planning that out. It's going to be bigger and better than it was this year. So if you're interested in that, please reach out to us. We hold a number of semi-formal networking mixers and other gatherings, spotlight speakers, happy hours in different specialty fields, more targeted gatherings, more informal gatherings, just dinners and things like that. Really working to deepen the connections between the finance industry and the space industry here, amplifying the work that those civic sector partners do and the role that they can play, especially in the regional space economies that exist outside of New York City. And then better integrating the entire ecosystem with state and local governments. Unlike a state like Florida or Texas or California or even Virginia or Colorado, where local and state government is very engaged in the space ecosystem there, in addressing these concerns. It's less of a focus for those leaders here in New York because it hasn't been the most prominent industry that we have here. That kind of fragmentation that exists within the ecosystem, that as well. So making sure that those leaders are aware of what's going on in New York, are aware of the opportunities, are aware of the challenges, and are able to contribute to solving them. And so now we'll just kind of um, share some of our insights that we've kind of gathered building this organization up over the last couple of years. This was all started from scratch. Evan and I met, randomly connected through email. We started having a conversation about wanting to see New York space ecosystem grow. Started with an email thread that turned into a spreadsheet, turned into a lot more spreadsheets, which turned into a website to publish our findings on the census. When we realized that the census had so much more in it than we had anticipated, and when we understood the scale of the challenges, we incorporated Empire Space as a 501c3 to be able to actually play a leadership role in moving New York space ecosystem forward. So just kind of generally some of the thoughts that we have. Rapid change. The space industry is going through a number of changes and fluctuations, the impacts of artificial intelligence, dynamic changes in satellite data analysis, advances in robotics, advances in medicine, a focus on sustainability. All of these things are evolving and interacting at an increasingly rapid pace. So just understanding the dynamic nature of the space economy, and that lesson is applicable anywhere. But it is something that we've noticed here in New York. Another key focus: collaboration is key. No one thrives in isolation. So find your partners, find your stakeholders, step outside of your comfort zone, and try to build as broad and as a cosmopolitan network as possible. That's what leads to innovation, unique insights, and really fosters growth. Um, don't shortchange your skill set. As I mentioned at the top, I'm a political science major. I don't have, formal academic training in the space ecosystem. So for the longest time, I didn't think that I had a role here. I thought, that ship had sailed. If I was going to be an astronaut, I would have had to, join the Air Force and work my way in that way. There isn't really a role for me here, because I don't have the right major. Don't don't buy into that, because the number of people that I have met in my 5 years of building this out um, is that there are a lot of people in the space industry who have made the transition from other specialties, and some of those folks have some of the best contributions because they're blending the lessons they learned from other industries into the needs of the space industry. So if you don't currently have, that formal background in training in space or aerospace, if you don't have, a degree or something like that, don't let that hold you back. If you want to have a role in the 21st century space economy, you 100% can, if you figure out how your current experience and background can best contribute, and then go for it. And then look for programs that are future focused. So not who is necessarily responding to the workforce needs of 5 years ago, but who is looking at building the space workforce 5 years from now? Who are the people who are thinking outside the box, who are innovating in some really interesting areas, who are thinking of how the combination of all these different specialties and innovations is going to work in the future. Those are some of the people who are usually doing the most innovative and interesting work. For those of you who may be looking at building a new organization, as someone who, like I said, we started this from scratch. It can be intimidating, but if you believe in it, if you have the passion, whether it's your main gig, whether it's a side gig, um, find the part of space that you really love and stay grounded in it. It took me a while to realize how that was going to work for me, but applying my background in community relations and constituent work really helped me understand how I could play a role in serving the stakeholders that we had identified here in New York. So find your passion, and then lean into it, and always stay grounded in it. Find a way to revisit. Have something that really just reminds you of why you love it in the first place. Another bit of advice: be humble. Don't think that you have all the answers. Always be ready to ask for outside advice. Be ready to receive outside of advice. You don't necessarily have to follow it, but it's good to let it in. Don't think that like I have all the answers. This is going to be exactly what it needs to be. Our mission has evolved over the years. My focus and energy has kind of evolved over the years because we were willing to ask those questions. We were willing to step outside of our comfort zone and invite people in to provide us their thoughts, provide us their insights. And we are a stronger organization for it. So having a healthy dose of humility is helpful when building out a new organization. Again, that networking collaboration. Find your partners, find your allies, maintain those relationships. Um, you can have a great conversation. You can have the best conversation in the world. But if you don't follow up on it, and if you don't, maintain that relationship, it's going to be limited in how much value it's going to have for you. So when you establish a new connection, make sure to maintain it. Check back in, hold an event, promote their events, things like that. Make sure that when you establish a new relationship, that you work on it because that's what will eventually pay off down the line. So that is the end of my formal presentation. Thank you again to Aries Learning and the Space Education Summit for having us. It was a pleasure to be able to join you today to talk about Empire Space, how we built this up, the New York space ecosystem, the history that we have in the space economy, we have throughout time. So it really was a pleasure to be able to join those of you who are here in the room and those of you who will be watching in the future. Our website is empirespace.org. If you have questions, want to become involved, our info is just info@empirespace.org. Please feel free to shoot us an email. We always love to answer questions. Talk about our census. If you're interested, we can walk you through what's going on where. If you're in the city and interested in attending events or something like that, please let us know. The website for Space Week New York is spaceweekny.com. There are links there. All of the virtual sessions, all 4 panels from the forum day, all the virtual spotlights that we had are recorded and available on our YouTube channel. So please be sure to go check those out if you're interested. And now I will stop sharing my screen, and I am happy to take any questions from anyone who's here in the audience. I saw some pop-ups when I was going. I didn't able to get to them while I was talking. I was afraid I was
Yeah,
going to
there
bite
was
some.
a question in the chat.
Mhm. Right. Yeah. So a couple folks in here interested in reaching out. We do take interns from outside of New York. We've had interns from out of the country as well. So please info@empirespace.org if you're interested in interning. We would be happy to have that conversation. Go ahead, yeah.
Oh, someone asked, oh, Oren asked what types of financial resources you tapped in to launch the incredible work that Empire Space is doing.
So for the most part, we have been a very thrifty organization. We are an all volunteer outfit. Evan and I both have full-time day jobs. I still work in local government. Evan is, unlike me, an actual aerospace engineer. We do receive resources from the two consortia that we participate in, the NASA New York Space Grant and the New York Consortium for Space Technology. A number of the projects that we've partnered with on them. And we are looking to grow our operation moving forward. We are kind of in a stage where we are evolving into a more formal full-time operation. The portfolio of work has grown, so that is in our future. And I see a couple in here. Yep, New York does have a significant focus on renewable energy that has kind of touched on some of our work a couple of different times. So we know that that is a key focus, and there are a couple of companies who do some work in kind of that crossover space. And then thank you, Warren. I'm glad that it was inspiring, and that the cells return. I would be happy to answer any other questions from anyone who is here in the room. If anyone else has anything in chat.
So my question is, what would you advise to a student who is like currently in college or like going to college and like he wants to get involved within the space industry? So what would you advise him to focus on?
So if you're just entering college, my advice would be to kind of at least peek in as many different doors as possible. Um, it's don't set your vision when you walk in the door like I'm going to do X in 10 years. Sometimes that works, but it's also good to kind of see what the field looks like. Join clubs. If there are student groups at your college or university, join them, participate. If there are professors who are doing interesting work, be sure to reach out to them. If there are active groups outside of the college sphere, wherever you happen to be, if there's a planetarium or an observatory nearby, see what kind of public events they hold, network with them. If there are space companies in your region, see if they do internships or things like that. So, especially if you're just entering college, at least for me, when I entered college, my choice was between a physics and astronomy major and a political science major. So I walked in with literally a very broad spectrum of where I could have possibly wound up, and I became a political science major who still wound up in space. So keep those options open. Try to make sure that the experience is kind of as broad as possible. Look at those space adjacencies as well. Artificial intelligence is going to be a huge player. Robotics is going to be a huge player. So informing yourselves about some of those adjacent technologies that might not necessarily be pure space, but have an impact on space, and understanding what's going on in those specialties and how they may impact space could open some interesting doors as well.
Um, what do you think leverages New York for like global collaboration in the space industry? Because now with I was in Abu Dhabi and they were talking about how the internet doesn't know like borders, and so we really like have to have global collaboration. But then space is also a security domain, so there's kind of like different
Yeah,
things going on.
they can, especially with private companies in terms of hiring, that can be a barrier. But the space industry and ecosystem is much broader than that. And one of the unique roles that New York plays, unlike a lot of other states, is it is already a global hub. Like New York City is a global city in its own right already. So oftentimes we've encountered a lot of companies that have their primary operations elsewhere, but will have a staff member or an office in New York City because of proximity to Wall Street. Because of that ease for global networking, if you have an event in New York City, it's relatively accessible for people, in Europe and the Western Hemisphere and things of that nature. So there's an existing very unique, very powerful global meeting, networking, resourcing environment. And so we actively look to try to tie New York space economy into some of those existing strengths that other states. Not to say that you couldn't have, a space forum or a space week, anywhere else, but it's easier in New York because a lot of companies already will travel to New York in some capacity. There's a lot of great space events. I think next week is New York Tech Week. There's a space focus there. Climate Week is going to be in September. There's a space focus there. A lot of global organizations will hold their conferences in New York City just because of the existing levels of connectivity that it offers. And that is a unique resource that only New York can really leverage.
Thank you.
So again, before we leave, I'll just put the links in the chat for anyone else who wants to visit us. Those are there for folks who are interested in visiting us and joining us. I don't see any more questions in the chat. But again, I just wanted to thank everyone who's here in the conversation with us. No, go ahead, Orrin.
I have a quick question. Given the evolving budgetary impact context, do you see an influence or an effect or going forward, right? Because a lot of the grants either are being driven by NASA or by some of the DoD, et cetera. Has there been any indication that the programs that you're dealing with are going to be impacted?
Yes. Yeah, no, that is the short and accurate answer. The evolving federal budgetary environment does play a role. A number of companies in New York are, to some degree, get their work from NASA related contracts, and it is we were made aware of earlier this year that NASA GIST, the Goddard Institute for Space Studies, which is located at Columbia University in Manhattan, is going through programming changes, and that space has currently been vacated. So the impacts are not theoretical in the future. The impacts are now, and one of the reasons that we exist is to help companies navigate that dynamic environment, and help the state of New York become more focused in filling any gaps that arise, being sure that they're doing their part on a local government, state government, economic development agency level to make sure that they're firing at all cylinders and doing what they can to support the entire space ecosystem. But that was the long answer. The short answer to your question is yes. Changes in the federal environment are being seen. That really can't be denied.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, in the future, I'll reach out to you to collaborate. We work on an international space mission with over 100 countries. So I love New York City because you can find people from these countries there. So that includes Haiti, Afghanistan, Malawi, a lot of, and then we have a quantum education component as well. So
Really?
and so yeah, we it's a partner with the Indian Space Agency in India. So yeah.
Interesting. On a personal level, I've written a couple of reports on the Indian Space Agency. Very inspired by the work that they do there, and that's gave me an opportunity before we wrap up to kind of highlight another unique aspect of New York, which is that international component. We've done work with the government of Luxembourg. They have a focus on space development. They have an office in New York City that we have partnered with. There are other governments that have offices in New York City. The UN exists in New York City. So in terms of some of those collaborations with other countries, New York is probably better positioned than most other states to play a role. And that was a conversation that came up during Space Week this year. Is a lot of these other countries maybe looking to expand their footprint in space, expand their own internal capacity in space, grow their own space economies, but may not have the domestic capacity to do so, or can get there faster if they rely on resources and expertise that may exist in existing space programs. And a lot of that does exist in New York. So if we have lessons to share with organizations or governments that are operating, elsewhere in the world, we're always happy to facilitate that conversation.
Thank you.
Share. See any other questions in the chat? I do want to thank everyone who joined us for this. It's always great to be able to engage with new folks, especially those from outside of New York who might not be familiar with the work that we do. It's always a privilege to be able to engage with other space enthusiasts from around the world and tell them about the work that we do and our mission here in New York. Thank you again, Evan, for joining us.
Thank you. Have a good one.
You too, bud. Sure. I don't know where.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Orna, and thank you for the question. Please feel free to reach out if you have any further questions in the future.
Will do.
What's some of your big challenges that you need help with? I hear financing could be a potential one.
Yeah. In terms of better integrating, and this is not necessarily true for just the finance sector, but a lot of New York's components of the space ecosystem tend to be externally focused. Their customers, their suppliers, their markets tend to be out of state. And it's the same for a lot of the space firms. Like a lot of, in terms of volume, a lot of, depending, pretty much regardless of what financial mechanism you're looking at, venture capital, establishment capital, Wall Street is home to all of it. And New York is one of the primary financiers of America's space economy. The problem is most of those resources are redirected out of state. And so it's building those connections between New York space companies and the space financiers that are in very close geographic proximity, but don't necessarily have the mutual awareness for companies to know what financial institutions they need to reach out to, and then for the financial institutions to be aware that there are investment opportunities in their own backyard. So a lot of that comes from awareness, networking, collaboration, identifying the right partners, holding the right events. And that also speaks to the role that those informal players have. Forums and structured events are fantastic. You get a lot of great feedback there, but we get even more interest in the semi-formal or the informal, where it's not you show up for a 3-hour talk, but you show up for 2 hours of mixing and mingling with a 15 or 20-minute talk. People enjoy that ability to kind of relax, open up, and interact with people outside of their own little corner of the space economy. and finding ways to facilitate that is one of our key goals. And then internally as an organization, yes, we are looking to grow in the future. At some point, having one or both of us do this work full time would eventually be the goal. There's lots of fantastic events that we would like to hold, resources that we would like to bring online. Because the project will never end. There will always be a need for us to continue growing and interacting and facilitating. So there's always a need for deeper connectivity like that.
Cool.
Thank you again for the question. We have a couple minutes left, so we'll run it all the way to the bell here. And what I will do, I will give folks a quick tour of the census. So this is what happens when you come to empirespace.org/data. So this is the page, and I'll just show you what one of these data tables like actually looks like. So we also have this information broken out by region. This is usually more helpful for New York-based stakeholders, regional leaders, and stuff like that. But you come up here, all of these are interactive. So you click on private sector, and it takes you to the data table itself. And we have a couple different groupings, but all the tables have the same information. We have your organization name, their specialty. We try to track revenue and employment as closely as we can. We provide relevant links to social media if they exist. We provide their location in the state. We try to provide some notes on what it is that they do, their region. And then this last column is actually the Assembly District and the Senate District. We wanted to make it easy and intuitive for stakeholders to identify who their legislative representatives are so they could build those connections. And then it also allows state legislators to identify the space-based stakeholders that are in their district. And all of these are interactive. You click on these and it takes you out to the company website. And so these are what our data tables look like. Go back here, academic sector, colleges and universities, it's the same. College program, its location, the resources that they offer, links, notes, everything like that. So that's just kind of a quick tour of what our census is and how it operates. We always look to expand these opportunities and these offerings. We always add new entries. We're well aware that we don't have everyone. We think we have almost everyone. We're most of the way there. But every once in a while, we'll become aware of a company that's been in operation for a while that just kind of operates under the radar. New companies will relocate to the state. So that's just kind of a quick tour of the census itself and how to use it. And then anytime if anyone, on this call or in the future identifies a stakeholder that they would like to reach out to or learn more about, please ping us an email. If we have a relationship with them, we're happy to facilitate conversations. If not, we can conduct outreach and facilitate that conversation anyways. And then always keep in touch, LinkedIn, Facebook, all those different places. We have event updates. We're hosting a virtual spotlight next week with Near Space Labs that does high altitude advanced robotics observations to kind of fill the gaps between airplane and satellite based data observations. So we're always holding events, sponsoring events, attending events. So please be sure to stay in touch if you want to join us for any of that in the future.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.